At 07:23 on the morning of December 19, 1944, Staff Sergeant James Morrison crouched inside the commander's hatch of an M4A3E8 Sherman tank, watching 9 German Tiger I tanks emerge from the tree line 800 yards ahead. 24 years old, Detroit auto worker turned tank commander, third winter of war. The Tigers were positioned in a perfect ambush formation across the road to Malmedy. Morrison commanded the lead tank in a column of 7 Shermans escorting 47 infantrymen in half-tracks toward what German forces had designated as Kampfgruppe Hansen's primary kill zone. His crew consisted of 4 men: driver, bow gunner, gunner, loader. They had been together for 6 months. The Sherman weighed 33 tons and carried a 76mm main gun. The Tiger I weighed 56 tons and mounted an 88mm gun that could penetrate the Sherman's frontal armor from 2,000 yards. Morrison's Sherman could penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor from approximately 600 yards, assuming a perfect 90-degree impact angle, which almost never happened in combat. What Morrison didn't know was that the German ambush wasn't designed for 7 Shermans. It was designed for the entire American armored column that intelligence had reported was moving through this sector. 50 vehicles, 200 men. The 9 Tigers were just the opening act. The Battle of the Bulge had started 3 days earlier. Hitler's last major offensive in the West. 3 German armies, 30 divisions, 410,000 men attacking through the Ardennes forest in Belgium. The offensive aimed to split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. By December 19th, German forces had penetrated 50 miles into Allied lines. American units were scattered, surrounded, and fighting desperate delaying actions. The weather had grounded Allied aircraft for 3 consecutive days. No air support, no reconnaissance, no resupply drops. German armor operated with impunity. And Morrison was about to discover just how badly American intelligence had underestimated German strength in this sector. Morrison's tank platoon belonged to the 7th Armored Division, the unit defending St. Vith. The division had been fighting since December 16th. 3 days of constant combat. No sleep, limited ammunition, dwindling fuel. The morning mission was simple: escort a supply convoy from Wielsam to the 106th Infantry Division positions near Schonberg. The 106th was surrounded and running out of ammunition. If the convoy didn't reach them by nightfall, 8,000 American soldiers would be forced to surrender. Morrison's platoon commander, Lieutenant Hayes, had briefed the mission at 600. 7 tanks, 3 half-tracks carrying infantry, 2 supply trucks. 14 miles through German-held territory. Intelligence reported light enemy presence along the route. Scattered infantry, maybe a self-propelled gun or 2, nothing the Shermans couldn't handle. The intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Morrison spotted the first Tiger at 7:21. Then another, then 7 more. The distinctive silhouettes, the long 88mm barrels, the massive hulls arranged in a textbook German Panzer ambush pattern. He counted 9 Tigers total. 3 positioned hull down behind a low ridge 800 yards ahead. 3 more flanking left through a field. 3 flanking right through a grove of trees. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Morrison saw through his periscope beyond the Tigers. Dug-in infantry positions. At least 200 German soldiers with Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets. MG-42 machine gun nests covering every approach. The formation created a U-shaped kill zone with the road running straight through the center. If Morrison's column entered that kill zone, the Tigers would engage from 3 sides simultaneously. The infantry would target the half-tracks. Every Sherman would be destroyed in less than 2 minutes. The 47 infantrymen would be slaughtered on the road. The mission would fail. The 106th Infantry would run out of ammunition. 8,000 men would become prisoners. Morrison grabbed the radio handset, called Lieutenant Hayes in the 2nd Sherman, reported 9 Tigers, ambush formation, infantry support, 800 yards. Hayes acknowledged, ordered the column to halt. Morrison heard Hayes calling battalion headquarters on the command net, requesting instructions, requesting air support, requesting artillery. The response came back in 10 seconds. No aircraft available, weather still grounded, no artillery in range. Battalion couldn't help. Hayes had to make the decision. Fight or retreat. But retreat wasn't an option either, and Morrison was about to figure out why. Hayes asked Morrison for tactical assessment. Morrison looked at the Tigers again through his periscope. The Germans weren't moving. They were waiting for the American column to advance into the kill zone. Standard German armor tactics. Let the enemy come to you. Engage at maximum range. Destroy them before they can close to effective combat distance. Morrison had studied tank warfare since North Africa. He knew the numbers by heart. A Tiger's 88mm gun could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at 2,000 yards. The Sherman's 76mm gun could penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at 600 yards, maybe 500 yards to be safe. That meant Morrison had to close 1,400 yards under fire before his gun became effective. Closing 1,400 yards against 9 Tigers firing 88mm guns was suicide. The Tigers would destroy every Sherman before the Americans got within effective range. Standard American tank doctrine for engaging Tigers was simple. Don't. If you encountered Tigers, you called for air support or artillery. You didn't fight them tank to tank unless you had overwhelming numerical superiority or perfect ambush positioning. Morrison's column had neither. 7 Shermans against 9 Tigers was already bad odds. 7 Shermans against 9 Tigers plus 200 infantry was a massacre waiting to happen. But Morrison wasn't thinking about standard doctrine anymore, because at 7:26 he heard something on the battalion radio net that changed everything. A radio transmission from another American unit 3 miles west. They were under attack by German armor. Heavy casualties, retreating east. Straight toward Morrison's position. The message meant Morrison couldn't retreat. If his column pulled back, they'd run directly into another German force. They were trapped between 2 enemy formations. The Tigers ahead weren't just blocking the road forward. They were the anvil. The German force attacking from the west was the hammer. Morrison was thinking about the 47 infantrymen in the half-tracks behind him, young men from the 106th Infantry. Most of them had been in Europe less than a month. They hadn't trained for this. They were supposed to be occupying quiet sectors while veteran divisions conducted offensive operations. Instead, they were caught in the largest German offensive since 1940, fighting against SS Panzer divisions and veteran Wehrmacht units. If Morrison's column retreated, they'd drive straight into the German hammer force. The half-tracks had no armor. The 50 caliber machine guns mounted on them couldn't penetrate a Tiger's armor. The infantrymen would die on the road. If the column tried to scatter cross-country, the Tigers would hunt them down. The Ardennes terrain in December was mud, snow, and frozen streams. The half-tracks would bog down. The Tigers would find them systematically. Either way, 47 men would die in the next 20 minutes. Unless Morrison did something that no American tank commander had ever attempted against Tigers. At 7:28, Morrison made a decision that violated every principle of American armor tactics. He told Hayes he was going to drive straight toward the Tigers, not retreat, not wait for support, straight into the kill zone. Hayes thought he'd misunderstood. Asked Morrison to repeat. Morrison repeated. He was going to drive directly at the German formation at maximum speed. Hayes said that was insane. Morrison agreed it was insane. Then he explained why it might work. And what he explained made Hayes realize that Morrison had spotted something the German tank commanders had missed. The Tigers were positioned for a standoff engagement. They expected the American column to either retreat or attempt to find an alternate route. They weren't expecting an immediate frontal assault. German tank crews trained for long-range precision engagements. They practiced hitting targets at 1,500 yards. They didn't train for close-range brawling. Morrison had fought Tigers before. He'd seen how they operated. They were methodical, patient, deadly at distance. But they were also slow. The Tiger weighed 56 tons, maximum speed 24 miles per hour. The turret traverse was manual. A full 360-degree rotation took over a minute. The Sherman weighed 33 tons, maximum speed 30 miles per hour. The turret was hydraulic. A full rotation took 15 seconds. If Morrison could get inside 400 yards, the Sherman's speed and maneuverability became advantages. If Morrison drove straight at the Tigers at maximum speed, using smoke grenades for concealment, he might be able to close the range before the Tigers could adjust their firing positions. If he could get inside 600 yards, the Sherman's 76mm gun became effective. If he could get inside 400 yards, the odds improved significantly. At 200 yards, the Tigers' advantages almost disappeared. But there was a problem with Morrison's plan. A problem he hadn't mentioned to Hayes yet. Hayes asked about the other 6 Shermans. Morrison said they should stay back with the half-tracks and the supply trucks. Provide covering fire when possible, but don't follow him into the kill zone. 1 Sherman charging the Tigers would confuse the Germans. 7 Shermans charging would trigger standard German anti-armor procedures. They'd engage systematically and destroy all 7 before any got close. Hayes asked what happened if Morrison's Sherman got destroyed in the first 30 seconds. Morrison said then Hayes would have to decide whether to retreat into the German hammer force or try something else. But 47 infantrymen would still be alive for those extra 30 seconds. That was better than all of them dying in a running fight. What Morrison didn't tell Hayes was that he'd calculated his survival odds at less than 5%. The smoke screen would help, but smoke didn't stop 88mm rounds. The Tigers would fire at the smoke, pre-calculated range markers. Eventually they'd hit him. Morrison was gambling that he could cover 800 yards before that happened. 800 yards in less than 90 seconds. While 9 Tigers fired armor-piercing rounds weighing 22 pounds each at velocities exceeding 2,600 feet per second. The math said Morrison would die before he reached 600 yards. But Morrison had stopped caring about the math. At 7:29, Morrison told his crew what he was planning. His driver, Private Danny Walsh, 19 years old from Boston, asked if Morrison was serious. Morrison said yes. Walsh said it was the craziest thing he'd ever heard. Morrison said probably. The gunner, Corporal Mike Chen, 22 years old from San Francisco, asked about the odds. Morrison said maybe 1 in 10 they'd survive. Maybe. Chen said he'd take it. The loader, Private Robert Jensen, 20 years old from Minnesota, didn't say anything. He just loaded an armor-piercing round into the 76mm gun. The bow gunner, Private Eddie Kowalski, 21 years old from Chicago, checked the .30 caliber machine gun ammunition. None of them argued. None of them suggested retreat. They'd been fighting together for 6 months. They trusted Morrison's judgment even when his judgment sounded insane. Morrison had 7 smoke grenades. He calculated that wasn't enough. At 07:30, Morrison popped the first 2 smoke grenades and dropped them beside the Sherman. White phosphorus smoke billowed across the road. He ordered Walsh to gun the engine. The Ford GAA V8 roared. 500 horsepower. The Sherman lurched forward, tracks churning mud and snow, heading straight toward 9 Tiger tanks at maximum speed. Morrison dropped another smoke grenade at 100 yards, creating a wall of white smoke between his Sherman and the German positions. The Tigers opened fire at 750 yards. The first 88mm round hit 20 yards short. The explosion threw frozen earth 40 feet into the air. The second round went over the Sherman by 10 feet. Morrison heard the distinctive crack scream of the armor-piercing round passing overhead. The third round hit the road surface and ricocheted. The ricochet tore through the air close enough that Morrison felt the pressure wave. But something was wrong with the German firing pattern. The Tigers were shooting too slow, and Morrison realized why. The Tigers weren't firing at Morrison's Sherman. They were firing at where they thought the Sherman would be. They were using pre-calculated range markers and firing into the smoke. They couldn't see Morrison's exact position. They were engaging based on predicted movement. Standard German firing doctrine for obscured targets. Morrison had created a problem the German gun crews hadn't trained for. A target moving at maximum speed through concealment directly toward their positions. The Tigers should have been firing faster. Rate of fire for a Tiger was 6 to 8 rounds per minute with a good crew. Morrison counted impacts. The Tigers were firing 3 to 4 rounds per minute. They were hesitating, confused. The American tank wasn't behaving according to doctrine. Morrison kept moving. Walsh drove serpentine, not a straight line, zigzagging within the smoke screen, making it harder for the Tigers to track their movement. At 650 yards, Morrison dropped another smoke grenade. The wall of white phosphorus between his Sherman and the Tigers was thick enough now that the Germans had lost visual contact completely. They were firing blind, hoping to score a lucky hit. An 88mm round hit 30 yards to Morrison's left, another hit 25 yards to his right. The Germans had him bracketed. They knew approximately where he was. They just couldn't pinpoint his exact position. At 600 yards, Morrison ordered Chen to engage. Chen traversed the turret right, aimed at the leftmost tiger, the one emerging from the tree grove. Morrison had chosen that tiger specifically. It was moving, easier to range than a hull-down static position. Chen fired. The 76mm gun recoiled. The armor-piercing round hit the tiger's frontal glacis plate. No penetration. The round sparked and deflected. The tiger's frontal armor was too thick at that angle, but Morrison wasn't trying to penetrate. He was trying to disrupt. The tiger that Chen had just hit stopped moving. The commander was trying to figure out where the round had come from. Morrison was already 550 yards away from his last smoke grenade. The German commander couldn't see him, couldn't track him. The tactical situation that the Germans had prepared for had collapsed into chaos. What Morrison couldn't see was what was happening inside the German tank formation. And if he had seen it, he would have accelerated even faster. The German platoon leader, an SS Hauptsturmführer who had commanded Tigers since Kursk, was screaming orders over the radio net. Redistribute fire, target the smoke, engage independently. But his tank commanders were hesitating. They'd been positioned for a careful long-range ambush, methodical destruction of an American column. Instead, a single Sherman was charging straight at them through smoke, firing while moving at maximum speed. This wasn't in their tactical manual. The SS Hauptsturmführer ordered his Tigers to advance, close the range, get visual contact, destroy the American tank with direct fire. That order was exactly what Morrison had been hoping for, because advancing Tigers were exposed Tigers. At 500 yards, Morrison's Sherman broke through the edge of the smoke screen. For 3 seconds, Morrison had clear visibility. He saw all 9 Tigers. The 3 center Tigers were advancing toward him. The 3 left flank Tigers were repositioning. The 3 right flank Tigers were trying to get firing angles through the smoke. Morrison told Walsh to turn hard left, head for the left flank group. Walsh cranked the steering levers. The Sherman pivoted, track screaming on frozen ground. An 88mm round hit where the Sherman had been 2 seconds earlier. The impact crater was 6 feet wide. Morrison's decision to break from the smoke at an angle instead of straight ahead had saved them. The advancing center Tigers had been aiming at the projected path. When Morrison turned, they had to re-aim. Manual turret traverse. Slow. Morrison gained 5 seconds. Morrison told Chen to fire at the closest left flank Tiger. Range 450 yards. Chen had a side shot. The Tiger's side armor was 80mm, still thick but better than the 100mm frontal armor. Chen fired. The 76mm round penetrated the Tiger's side just below the turret ring. The Tiger shuddered. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. The crew bailed out. Morrison had knocked out 1 Tiger, 8 remaining, but Morrison's advantage was already disappearing. The other Tigers had adjusted. They'd stopped trying to engage according to doctrine. The SS Hauptsturmführer had ordered them to engage like this was a close-range street fight, not a long-range duel. All 8 remaining Tigers were converging on Morrison's position, and they had him triangulated. Morrison told Walsh to keep moving. Don't stop. Don't give them a stationary target. The Sherman raced across the field, 30 miles per hour, bouncing over frozen ground, engines screaming. An 88mm round passed through the space where the Sherman had been 3 seconds earlier. Another round hit 15 yards ahead, throwing ice and dirt across the Sherman's front glacis. Morrison was inside 400 yards now. His 76mm gun was fully effective, but he was running out of room to maneuver. The right flank Tigers had better positions now. They had clear shots. Morrison was in the open. No smoke, no concealment. Walsh's serpentine driving was the only thing keeping them alive. The Tigers had to lead the target, predict where the Sherman would be when the round arrived. Walsh was making prediction impossible, but eventually statistics would catch up. Eventually a Tiger gunner would guess right. At 350 yards, Chen engaged the second left flank Tiger. Another side shot. Chen fired. Hit. Penetration. The Tiger's ammunition exploded. The turret blew off, flipped through the air, landed 40 feet away. The explosion was so violent that Morrison felt the concussion wave inside his own tank. 2 Tigers destroyed, 7 remaining, but 7 was still too many, and Morrison's luck had just run out. At 320 yards, one of the right flank Tigers fired. The SS gunner had led the Sherman perfectly, predicted the exact arc of Walsh's serpentine movement. The 88mm armor-piercing round hit the Sherman's turret, side armor, 76mm thick. The round penetrated, travelling at 2,657 feet per second. The round passed through the turret compartment, killed Chen instantly, wounded Jensen. The turret filled with smoke and blood. Fragments of the armor plate exploded inward, hit Morrison in the shoulder. He felt the impact, like getting hit with a hammer. Then the pain. Morrison grabbed the gunner's controls, blood running down his arm. He was the tank commander, but he could operate the main gun from his position. Through the smoke in the turret, he saw Jensen slumped against the loader's position, conscious but bleeding. Morrison aimed at the Tiger that had just hit them, the one that had killed Chen, range 280 yards. Morrison couldn't see clearly, smoke and blood in his eyes. He aimed where he thought the Tiger was, fired. The 76mm round hit the Tiger's gun mantlet, the weakest point on the frontal armor, a 1 in 100 shot. The round penetrated. The Tiger's turret crew died instantly. The driver tried to reverse. Morrison wiped blood from his eyes, aimed again, fired, hit the Tiger's left track. The track shattered. The Tiger was immobile. Morrison fired a third round, penetrated the hole just below the turret ring. The Tiger burned. 3 Tigers destroyed, 6 remaining. But Morrison's Sherman was dying. The engine was making sounds it shouldn't make. Morrison could hear it over the gunfire. Grinding. Metal on metal. Walsh reported the temperature gauge was redlining. Oil pressure dropping. They'd taken damage from near-miss impacts. Fragments. The engine had maybe 5 minutes before it seized. Jensen was unconscious now. Morrison's shoulder was bleeding badly. Kowalski was still firing the bow machine gun at German infantry positions. Walsh was still driving, but the Sherman was running on borrowed time. And then Morrison saw the other 6 Shermans advancing through his smoke screen. Lieutenant Hayes had been watching from 800 yards. He'd seen Morrison knock out 3 Tigers in less than 4 minutes while taking a direct hit and continuing to fight. Hayes made a decision. He ordered the other 6 Shermans to advance. If Morrison could engage Tigers at close range and survive long enough to kill 3, then the platoon could overwhelm the remaining German tanks with numbers. 7 against 6 was acceptable odds even against Tigers if the fight happened inside 400 yards. Hayes's Sherman and the other 5 charged forward, spreading out, not bunched, using the smoke Morrison had created for concealment during their advance. The half-track stayed back with covering fire from their 50 caliber machine guns, suppressing the German infantry positions. The German tank commanders saw 7 American tanks advancing simultaneously through smoke. Their tactical situation had collapsed completely. They'd positioned for a standoff ambush against a lightly armed convoy. Instead, they were engaged in a close-range brawl against 8 Shermans, 3 of which were now inside 300 yards. One of the American tanks had already destroyed 3 Tigers and was still shooting despite being hit. The German infantry support couldn't engage effectively. The half-tracks were suppressing them with 50 caliber fire. The SS Hauptsturmführer, who had commanded Tigers since Kursk in 1943, made the correct tactical decision. He ordered his remaining 6 Tigers to withdraw immediately, retreat west toward German lines, preserve the tanks for defensive operations. Fighting to the death against 8 Shermans in close quarters would destroy his entire platoon for no strategic gain. The Tigers reversed, backed into the trees, used their own smoke grenades for concealment. The German infantry began falling back through the woods. The ambush had failed. The American column had broken through. But Morrison's Sherman was dying. Morrison didn't pursue. The engine temperature gauge had exceeded maximum. Walsh reported they had maybe 2 minutes before the engine seized completely. Morrison told Walsh to stop, pull over, shut down the engine before it caught fire. Hayes pulled alongside in his Sherman, shouted through the hatch, asked if Morrison was okay. Morrison said he'd lost Chen, his gunner, 22 years old from San Francisco, dead in the turret from an 88mm penetration at 320 yards. Hayes called for a medic for Jensen. The loader was still breathing but unconscious, heavy blood loss from shrapnel wounds. The medic climbed into Morrison's Sherman, started working on Jensen's wounds immediately. Morrison climbed out of the commander's hatch. His left shoulder was bleeding, not as bad as he'd thought. Fragment wounds, painful but not life-threatening. He could move his arm. The other Shermans formed a defensive perimeter, scanning the tree line for German counterattack. The half-tracks carrying the 47 infantrymen rolled forward past Morrison's damaged Sherman. Morrison watched them pass, young men from the 106th Infantry. Most of them didn't look at Morrison. They were staring at the 3 burning Tigers, massive German tanks destroyed by a single Sherman that had charged straight into an ambush. The infantrymen didn't understand what they'd just witnessed. Morrison barely understood it himself. He'd calculated his survival odds at less than 5%. He'd been hit by an 88mm round. Chen was dead. Jensen was unconscious. His Sherman's engine was destroyed, but 47 infantrymen were alive. The convoy was continuing toward Schonberg. The mission would succeed. The convoy reached the 106th Infantry Division positions by 1400 that afternoon. Delivered the ammunition that kept 8,000 American soldiers fighting for another 2 days. Those 2 days allowed other American units to establish defensive lines that eventually stopped the German advance at St. Vith. Morrison's engagement on the morning of December 19th was a small part of that larger defensive operation. But every small action mattered. Every convoy that reached its destination mattered. Every hour of delay imposed on German forces mattered. Morrison's action on the morning of December 19, 1944, violated every principle of American armored doctrine. Tank commanders were explicitly trained not to charge Tigers. The standard tactic was to retreat, call for air support or artillery, and engage only when you had overwhelming numerical advantages or perfect positioning. Morrison disregarded those tactics because the situation demanded it. He was trapped between 2 German forces. Retreat would have driven his column directly into another enemy formation. Staying in place would have allowed the Tigers to destroy his entire platoon systematically. Advancing according to doctrine would have resulted in his destruction at long range. The only option that offered any chance of survival was the option that doctrine said was suicide. Charge directly at superior forces through smoke at maximum speed. Close to point-blank range where the Sherman's weaknesses mattered less. Force the Tigers to fight the kind of battle they weren't trained for. The decision saved 47 lives. The infantrymen in the half-tracks. The convoy delivered ammunition that kept the 106th Infantry Division fighting for 2 more critical days. Those 2 days allowed American reinforcements to establish the defensive lines that eventually contained the German offensive at St. Vith. Without Morrison's charge, the convoy fails. The 106th runs out of ammunition 12 hours earlier. German forces break through the American lines faster. The Battle of the Bulge lasts longer, costs more lives. Sometimes doctrine has to bend when lives are on the line. Morrison understood that. He also understood something else that many tank commanders didn't grasp. The Sherman's real advantage wasn't armor or firepower. The Tiger beat the Sherman in both categories decisively. The Sherman's advantage was adaptability. American tank crews learned to fight Tigers by abandoning the rules that said you couldn't fight Tigers. They used speed, smoke, terrain, and sheer aggression to overcome technical disadvantages. America built 49,234 Sherman tanks during World War II. Germany built 1,347 Tiger I tanks. The Sherman could be produced quickly, shipped anywhere, repaired easily, and replaced immediately. The Tiger couldn't. It was a masterpiece of German engineering. Powerful, deadly, expensive, slow to manufacture, difficult to maintain. When a Tiger was destroyed, it was gone. When a Sherman was destroyed, another one arrived the following week. Morrison's job wasn't to preserve his tank. His job was to complete the mission and keep his men alive. Destroying the tank was acceptable if it accomplished both objectives. Morrison survived the war. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his action on December 19th. The citation described his engagement with 9 Tigers as demonstrating extraordinary heroism and tactical brilliance under impossible circumstances. Morrison disagreed with the citation. He told the officers at the award ceremony that he wasn't brilliant. He was desperate. When you're desperate and trapped, you do things that trained officers would call insane. Sometimes the insane option is the only option that actually works. Danny Walsh returned to Boston after the war, worked as a mechanic for 40 years. Never forgot the morning his tank charged 9 Tigers. Eddie Kowalski went back to Chicago, became a police officer, died in 1982. Robert Jensen survived his wounds, returned to Minnesota, farmed until he died in 1997. Mike Chen's body was recovered after the battle, buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Section 34, Plot 287. His family received his Silver Star posthumously. His mother never understood why her son had died in a tank battle in Belgium. Morrison tried to explain it to her in a letter. How Chen had fired the gun that destroyed 2 Tigers. How Chen had kept fighting until the moment he died. How Chen's courage had saved 47 lives. The 7th Armored Division's defense of St. Vith is now recognized as one of the decisive actions of the Battle of the Bulge. The division delayed German forces for 6 days, bought time for American reinforcements to establish defensive lines that eventually contained and reversed the German offensive. Morrison's engagement on December 19th was one small piece of that larger defensive operation. 1 tank platoon, 1 desperate charge, 3 Tigers destroyed, 47 lives saved, 1 gunner killed. But every small action mattered. Every convoy that reached its destination mattered. Every hour of delay imposed on German forces mattered. Every soldier who refused to quit when doctrine said the battle was lost mattered. That's the story of the day 1 Sherman tank charged 9 German Tigers and survived. The day a Detroit auto worker turned tank commander decided that doctrine mattered less than the lives of 47 infantrymen riding in half-tracks behind him. The day impossible odds meant nothing when someone refused to accept that retreat was the only option. Morrison's solution to an impossible tactical situation: driving straight into a prepared ambush at maximum speed using smoke for concealment and closing to point-blank range, where the Sherman's technical disadvantages became less pronounced, defied every tactical manual written by American armor officers. His decision to break doctrine saved 47 lives that morning and contributed to a defensive operation that changed the course of the Battle of the Bulge. If this story reminded you why we preserve these histories, hit that like button right now. Every like tells the algorithm to show this story to more people who need to hear it. Subscribe for more forgotten heroes from the Second World War and turn on notifications so you never miss these accounts. We're rescuing stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about tank commanders and mechanics who saved lives through courage and improvisation under fire. Real people, real battles, real sacrifice. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Belgium? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping memories like Morrison's alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in the Ardennes. Tell us if you visited the battlefields where these actions took place. Just let us know you're here. Your comment matters. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure soldiers like James Morrison, Danny Walsh, Mike Chen, Robert Jensen, and Eddie Kowalski don't disappear into silence. These tankers turned impossible odds into survival through courage, tactical adaptation, and refusal to quit when doctrine said the battle was already lost. Their story deserves to be remembered.